Did you imagine life with a 1-year-old to be calmer than it is? Are you surprised at how vigilant you need or needed to be only 1 year after welcoming your newborn? And can you relate to how exhausting life with a 1-year-old is, especially when compared to how life with a baby this age is portrayed in the media? So the big question is this: how do we navigate through the mountain of overwhelming, often contradictory, and sometimes false parenting information we find online? What parenting information should you believe and apply, and what should you reject? That is the big question, and in this podcast, we will help you understand what underlies your child's behavior and explain how to react in a way that favors your child's optimal development. I'm Alexandra Scherzer, and welcome to the Wise Parenting Podcast. A while back, we created a post on social media that referred to an article I came across on Scary Mommy, entitled, "Why Being the Parent of a 1-Year-Old is Beyond Exhausting." As funny as I found this article to be, and it literally made me laugh out loud throughout the entire thing, I couldn't help but take note at how much I could relate to what the author of the article, Reagan Long, described. So today, you will listen in on a conversation I had with my mom, Dr. Solomon, about this article. I wanted to look more closely at why I felt this article was so relatable. So we decided to take our wise parenting formula and break down the general theme of parenting a 1-year-old to look at the specific factors that add up to this article being so relatable. Whether you currently have a 1-year-old at home or whether your child is a little older, this article is a great read. So if you can get a couple of minutes of downtime, check out our show notes to find the direct link to the article. So here it is, the conversation we had about what life looks like when you're parenting a 1-year-old. Okay, so we had posted an article on Facebook that caught my attention because it just rang so true. The article was posted on Scary Mommy and written by Reagan Long, and it talks about how exhausting the life with a 1-year-old actually is versus what we see on commercials and in the media, and how it's portrayed in even in movies. When things look chaotic, it looks more chaotic than exhausting. So let's get into it. Why is the life with a 1-year-old so exhausting, and we certainly isn't portrayed that way before you're actually living it?
Well, it's extremely exhausting because you have a baby who usually can get around either by crawling, some by walking, and they have no judgment whatsoever. All they have is curiosity, which is great. You certainly want your children to be curious. You have to be careful, as a matter of fact, not to damp that down. On the other hand, since they have no judgment, they have no idea what can hurt them or what can be destructive for the environment or what can hurt an adult. They have no idea if they put their hand in the plug that they might get electrocuted. They have no idea that if they fall down the stairs, they can break their neck. All they have is curiosity, energy, and muscles that are pushing them. Muscles are saying, move, move, move. When you move, we develop.
Okay, so if we break down the exhaustion of parenting a 1-year-old into our methodology, which is WISE parenting, W-I-S-E.
Mm-hmm.
W stands for what you're working with.
Yeah, exactly.
So that really means who you're working with.
Yeah.
Who's your child, and not every child is the same.
Yeah.
What's going on or what you see with one child may appear to be the same as with another child, but it actually isn't.
That's right.
So let's take an actual example, which is James was about 10 months old, 11 months old. I was just here in the kitchen. I put him down on the floor for 2 minutes, which is always how horror stories start. It was only 2 minutes.
Right.
I put his dishes in the sink, and I heard him playing here, but normally he opens up a drawer, a cupboard, and there's just little pots and things that he can play with. So that's what I thought he was doing. I came into the room. He was actually on the dining room table, standing up, trying to reach the chandelier.
Oh.
So that's sort of what was going on in this article, where she's trying to clearly get something done in the kitchen, and every 2 seconds she's shocked at what her baby's doing, her 1-year-old's doing, running after the baby, trying to make things okay for the baby to be okay for 5 minutes, and it's just going on, and it's actually quite humorous in the article, and it is at times in real life, but it's also exhausting. So
can I interrupt you and say that this is why people used to use playpens? They used to lock the child in the playpen.
Which we really don't see as much anymore.
No, because we know that in order not to block or inhibit in any way the development, the more freedom they have to explore, the more they learn, and the more those parts of the brain, those involved with learning, develop. And the more your child has at this age to reach his full potential for this age, which means that you have to be chasing him all day long.
So what's interesting about the playpen, I had never thought of that, is that we have a pack and play.
Mm-hmm.
We thought he would use it as a crib as a newborn. That never worked out. There was no room in our kitchen to put the playpen, and honestly, he wouldn't have been okay in the playpen.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to move around.
Yes.
And walk around. So it wasn't ever an idea in my head that we shouldn't use it. It was just we didn't because of circumstance.
Yeah. So to get back to RW, what you're working with.
Yeah.
To keep one child in a playpen who doesn't have that much pressure from his brain and muscles to crawl, to go, to explore, will sit quietly in a playpen and develop fine. I'm not saying that, if you buy a playpen or you put your child in a playpen, you've destroyed brain cells. It depends on your child. Some children will thrive, although they've been pretty well kept in a playpen, not all the time, but a good part of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas another child, it really wouldn't be good for them.
So the W in this case is, if we apply it to my example, and James is the who and what you're working with. Well, by 11 months, it was very clear. We knew James was a little boy who needed to move, needed to be active.
Right.
And of course, there were times when he indicated that he wanted to just sit and read or look at something with us quietly on the couch or on the floor, but more often than not, he's an on-the-move baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so to recap the exhaustion of a 1-year-old and the W in our methodology is by one, before that, but definitely by one. By the time your baby's on the move, you know who your baby is.
Yes.
Will they be okay in a playpen or sit in a high chair?
Mm-hmm.
And watch you while you prepare the meal? Or do you have to do what this lady did in the article, which is try to prepare a meal, probably will take you 5 times as long while chasing after your baby, doing all kinds of things due to curiosity, etc.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, the next...
It really involves what you're working with, really means respecting your child as an individual, and this starts almost from the moment of birth.
Right. So the next one is I in Y, so W-I.
Mm-hmm.
I is what's going on in your child, in their brain, their stage of a development.
Mm-hmm.
So you touched on that briefly before. Maybe let's repeat it.
Yes. That there are parts of your brain, of the child's brain, that are developing, and a lot of it has to do when they're very little with movement. A great deal has to do with movement. That is why they're moving around so much and getting into trouble, because that part of the brain is developing. And as I said before, while protecting your child and protecting yourself and having to do what you have to do, You really have to give them as much freedom to explore as you can for the muscle development, which is, of course, related to the brain development as a whole.
Right. Okay. So I guess the take-home message of about what's going on in your child, in their brain, their stage of development at around 1, is that they are on the move, and as they were before, but now they're on the move, really needing to learn about their environment.
Right.
Their muscles are really telling them to get out there, learn what's around you, explore.
Yeah. Touch.
Right.
While at the same time needing to be touched and cuddled.
Right. Okay, so that's I, and then S is being self-aware of your parenting.
That's such a big one and such a tough one. You know, looking after a child is already exhausting for many reasons. But to be aware of what you're doing and of the fact that what you do has consequences. You know, you read articles that say relax, forget about it, you can't be alert all the time, which is true. On the other hand, what you do has an effect, and especially what you do repeatedly has an effect, because it does get into the child's brain, and the child reacts and acts as a function of what you are doing. You are there. React as a function of how he, say he because it's easier than saying he or she each time, but they are the plasticine you're working with. On the other hand, you are working on this plasticine, therefore you have effects, and you really have to be aware of what you are doing. And you hear people say, well, then you can't sleep at night and what have you. But look, if you're working in an office or you're working on the development of a rocket to get to the moon, you're not going to sleep either. It's tough being a parent.
Yes. Time constraints aren't they a huge factor in being pressed into a certain type of parenting which you may not want to ideally be taking part in?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Well, certainly the circumstances in which you live and the demands that are being made of you, perhaps as a worker outside the home or a worker working inside the home. There are demands of you to, if you are with a significant other, there are demands on you to be a friend, companion, lover, consultant, driver. and here we're talking about one child. We're pretty well talking about a first child. If you have more than one child, whoa.
Right.
All this gets doubled and tripled, especially
Right.
if you have them close. But we'll get back to the point. Yes, what you do has an effect. What you do once in a while probably doesn't have an effect. But if something gets to be a habit, yes, it's going to have an effect. You are molding something, and depending on the medium you're working with, it's going to have one effect or another.
Right. So WISE for wise, we're at E, execute best practices based on scientific research. Now this article from Scary Mommy was really a general, all-inclusive look at parenting a one-year-old.
Right.
So maybe we can pull out a couple of examples of what we can do as parents. So we find that nice balance between being self-aware of our parenting practices and setting things up in, for example, our home environment such that our child can explore to the level that who they are interested in doing. They're not getting into too much trouble. We're not getting too frustrated because they're always getting into something. What are some examples that we could share as to how we can set things up or what we can do at this age?
At this age, well, I think I was saying before that you have to be aware of all the other demands on yourself and deal with that at the same time. On the other hand, there are some things you can let go. Like you don't have to have the cleanest house. As a matter of fact, you don't have to have a very clean house. It doesn't matter if it's a bit dusty. It doesn't matter if the dishes wait a few hours before being washed or being put in the dishwasher. I think you can let go of it. When you have young children, you can let go of certain things. If you're going to entertain, because you love to have your friends in, well, try having potluck dinners, which means you ask friends to bring things, or get things, buy things and serve them, and you don't have to set the most beautiful table. You don't have to do things that might have been important before the babies came along, and will become important and fun and rewarding when the children are a bit older. But during this age where they need you so physically, there are a lot of things that are not essential that you can let go.
So basically what you're saying is each person has to make their own list of priorities, and if we're aware of our child's development and we want to set things up best for them at this age in particular, where they're really on the go and they need us so physically, that we're aware of the time that it would take to clean a whole house or whatnot, and make actual decisions. Every person has their
their tolerance,
right.
Yeah.
So the more that we're self-aware, back to S,
yes.
Self-aware of ourselves, of our parenting, of course, but also of, what we're doing and why we're doing it, and why we're so frustrated chasing around the 1-year-old or exhausted. Is there something that can be changed or tweaked?
Yeah.
To alleviate?
Yeah. Is there something that you can be comfortable with letting go?
Right. And then maybe in terms of the scientific research and best practices, what can we say about 1-year-olds on the move? We talked about it briefly before, but just to wrap up with the scientific stuff, so why is it important for them to be so on the move?
It's important, basically for muscle and brain development. It all comes down to that. It's their muscles, as I said, are pushing them to move so that they can develop to their fullest abilities, so the child can be as strong as possible for a child of his age. And as I said, the brain's all connected. The fact that he is running around strengthens his legs, but as he's running around, he's looking at things, and he's learning how to skip and jump, and he's learning all kinds of things in other parts of his brain that are going to serve him well. It isn't that, just learning to jump off a step is essential, but it is essential for learning to balance. It's essential for learning that if a step is higher, you should hold on to the railing. There are all kinds of learning that goes on in addition to the actual exercise of the muscles.
Right. Okay, so I guess to finish off, I would just say that this article really caught my attention because I do have a son who is on the move. Yes. So reading all the examples in this article made me laugh because it was very relatable. It started off with 3 examples, one of which was bucking out of his seat,
yes,
which is something that we experience. And now he's older, but thinking back at one, it was a lot of chasing around. Maybe we'll just add this. We have a staircase. Of course, we put gates. At one, they aren't going to learn not to do something. So if we don't want them to do something, we have to set up our house such that they can't.
Exactly, yeah. Thinking ahead and setting things up is very helpful to the parents.
Right.
And it's good for the child because you don't inhibit the child's development. But it's very helpful for the parents to think ahead and set up things so that they don't get worried, upset, and annoyed. What you don't want to be with your 1-year-old is annoyed.
Right. So that wraps up today's episode, where we took you behind the scenes to listen in on a conversation I had with my mom, Dr. Solomon, all about why parenting a 1-year-old can be so exhausting. Our examples, such as keeping a house that's spick and span, came directly from the article posted on Scary Mommy. If you're interested in knowing more about what's going on in your 1-year-old's brain, be sure to listen back to episode 17, where we take a closer look at what's going on developmentally in your child's first developmental stage, which spans from birth to about 18 months. And again, if you have a few minutes, I'd encourage you to read the article on Scary Mommy. No doubt it will bring a smile to your face, if not full-out laughter. The link to the article by Reagan Long is in our show notes to make finding the article that much easier. We hope that you found today's podcast helpful. Come say hi on social. Our Facebook and Instagram accounts are @Dr. Solomon's Wisdom, all one word. You can subscribe to the Wise Parenting Podcast on any podcast app, including Spotify, the Apple and Google podcast apps, or wherever you listen. Parenting advice keeps changing on us, depending on what you read and who you listen to. This is making parents feel like they're doing a bad job. And worst of all, many parents today don't know who to trust for what is probably the most important job they'll ever have. So if you're the parent of a young child and you would like to feel clearer, more confident, and more at ease about your parenting decisions, then the Wise Parenting Academy can help you get there. With on-demand access to foundation lectures and seminars in digital, print, and audio, as well as exclusive one-on-one guidance from Dr. Solomon, the Wise Parenting Academy is the perfect next step to building the best long-term outcomes for your child. Come check us out at thewiseparentingacademy.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you will join us again.